So today I wanted to talk about the highly rumored, highly leaked, all the major insiders, both credible and even not so credible, have talked about this for several years. Of course, I'm talking about the Nintendo Switch Pro, and I wanted to talk about, my opinions on it because it's a bit different from what most people are saying. I can tell you that for sure. So, to start off with, I think these rumors started in like 2017, 2018. It was very shortly after the Switch itself released. There were rumors of like a smaller version of the Switch, which came true with the Switch Lite, and then there was rumors of like a 4K one, or one that could play at least somewhat of a better frame rate, or even just stabilized frame rates. And that kind of leads into my first issue with the Switch Pro. Everybody has a different vision of what they would want it to be. Some people are just like, well, we just want it more steady, 1080p, 30 FPS. Some people are just like, no, I want it 60 FPS. Some people are just like, no, I want it 4K. Some people are just like, no, I want it 4K, 60 FPS. And I don't think it makes sense right now for a Switch Pro to even exist. I never thought it made sense for a Switch Pro to exist for several reasons. First of which is, well, let's be honest. Nintendo has stopped competing on power since the Wii, so why would they all of a sudden just make a 4K system just because the PS5 and Series S and X are out? Like that, it's not really their style. It's not really how they work. Um, Second thing is, don't you think they would save the 4K and like the higher frame rates, like 60 FPS and all that? Wouldn't they save that for the next generation console? I think so. Because here's something that people don't really consider with this Switch Pro thing. Yes, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One have their Pro versions, absolutely. However, the difference is they weren't like massive jumps, and even with like the PS4 Pro to PS5 and stuff like that, it was a big, massive jump still. So it's just like, well, in this case, this wouldn't, because then it's just like, well, if we did get a 4K Switch at 60 FPS, what would the next gen Switch be? Because it would have to be a major jump from both the original Switch and the Pro. So what are we talking here? Like 8K 120? That's not going to happen. So that's why it doesn't really make sense. Also, we're 6 years into the console's life, right? Well, we're about to be actually, a few months shy of that. Why would they release a Pro now when in probably like 2 to 3 more years, if that, they would probably start talking about the next gen system? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And also, another point I like to bring up is the fact that, yeah, it would be great if the Switch Pro was real and they had the 4K and they have the better frame rates and all that. That'd be awesome, right? How many games would actually utilize a Pro to its fullest capacity? Because just because there's a Pro out on the market that could do all these cool specs and stuff that people want doesn't mean every game is going to utilize it. Heck, in my honest opinion, I don't think any games would utilize it because they still have to compensate for the original Switch, the Lite, and the OLED. Those would be the things that they compensate for first because those are going to have way larger install bases than a Pro ever will. So that just doesn't really make sense. So we wouldn't even be able to get full capacity out of these Switch Pro games, most likely. Sure, there could be some Nintendo exclusives that could take full advantage, but I feel like it would be extremely few and far between. Um, Lastly, this is my biggest point of contention. It's been rumored every single year, practically since the Switch has released, right? That's fine. I have no issues with that. In the video game industry, especially in current day, that's bound to happen. So fine, whatever. But what bothers me about that is every year goes by and there's still no Switch Pro. So it's this, especially for me, it's gotten to a point. It's just like, okay, guys, we're nearly 6 years into the Switch's life. There's still no Pro, like everybody's saying. Every single year we'll get one. Literally this year, a few months ago, people were just like, oh yeah, we're getting the Pro this year, guys. Get excited, and then nothing happened. So it's just like, well, I don't really, at this point, nearly 6 years into the console's life, I don't think we need a Pro. I think we need to start talking about the next generation. To be completely honest, yeah. Like, I feel like now is almost too late for a Pro, even if it were to be real, which again, I've never believed it to be the case. It just doesn't make sense to me. Especially because we still have the original Switch. Nintendo released their Black Friday deals and everything, and they're still going to have the original Switch with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for $300. Sure, it has a Nintendo Switch Online 3-month membership, which is cool, but it's still practically the same bundle as they've always had before. So clearly they still want to keep the OG Switch on the market, the Lite on the market, and the OLED on the market at their current prices. So a Switch Pro would at least cost $400, at least. And at that point, I mean, we're getting dangerously close to PS5 and Series X stuff, especially with the PS5 digital costing the same amount. So I really don't think that's a smart way to do things here. Lastly, I will say is I don't really think most people would buy this. Sure, the hardcore of hardcore gaming fans would buy this. Of course they would, because people have been begging for a 4K Switch. I'm not saying nobody's begging for it. Of course they are. But I don't think there's a big enough market there to really warrant doing a Pro at all, especially at this point, nearly 6 years in. If we were like 2 to 3 years in and the rumors were like as crazy as they are now, then I would be more willing to accept a Pro. I still wouldn't believe that because of all the reasons I've mentioned so far, but I was still like, you know what, that can make sense because there's still a lot of life to go here. But I mean, nearly 6 years into a console's life, you don't really need a revision, you need a next generation thing at that point. And people aren't going to like this, but I honestly think the OLED is the only Switch Pro we're getting anytime soon. Honestly. The OLED was like the mid-generation refresh thing. So, and everybody compares it to like the handhelds, like, oh, well, like the 3DS and like the Game Boy Advance, they all had multiple variants and stuff. And that's true, 100%, but there's one major difference that nobody talks about. Game Boy Advances, 3DSs were far less powerful than a Switch from the get-go, obviously. And so, like, it warrants getting, like, a new or, like, more better hardware in there and stuff like that, even if it's just minor tweaks and improvements, which it turned out to be. So that makes sense. Also, on top of that, Nintendo's handhelds, like the 3DS and Game Boy Advances and DSs even and stuff like that, were cheap enough to where people could freely upgrade from like a DS to a DSi or DS to a DSi XL without breaking the bank. But let's be honest here, a Switch Pro at minimum would cost $400. I mean, that's significantly more money than like a new 3DS XL. You know, sure, those weren't like crazy cheap or whatever, but they were significantly cheaper than a Switch Pro would be. So it makes more sense in that regard. So yeah, I just, at this point in the game, I really don't think a revision is what we need. I really don't think so. And I don't think we need a next-gen system right now either. I think they're fine where they're at, quite honestly. And people will point out, like, the recent reports of, like, PS5 outselling the Switch. And in my head, I'm just like, yeah, of course it did. Like, people try to use that as an argument for why we need this Switch Pro, and I'm just like, let me get this straight. A console that's been on the market for nearly 6 years that nearly everybody has, you're going to tell me is selling less than the PS5 that's not even 2 years old yet and barely anybody can still find still? Of course that's the case. Like, that's just basic stuff. Like, that's basic knowledge. Like, I don't need reports to prove that to me. Like, obviously that's going to happen. Yeah. PS5 is more in demand than the Switch. That doesn't mean we need a Switch Pro. Not at all. It's just like, yeah, of course it is. Because it came out way more recently than the Switch did. And the Switch has crazy sales, so yeah, overall, I don't really see the point of a Switch Pro ever. Because again, Nintendo doesn't really do that. They don't really care about that. Because again, most people buying this Switch, we have to understand this too. Most people buying the Switch do not care about the frame rates and the specs and all that stuff. Sure, some people do. And sure, I would love it. Who wouldn't love a 4K Switch with better frame rates and resolutions? I would. But to me, that sounds like a next-gen system, not a Pro. That sounds too good to be true for a Pro and way too expensive in the market to actually warrant them actually doing a Pro, especially right now. With crazy inflation going on and stuff, forget about it. Like, it's just, I feel like it would be way too much money, especially right now. Yeah, no, that I just don't think that would go over well. So yeah, like most people don't really buy a Switch or any Nintendo system in recent history for, the best specs and gameplay. Again, it would be great, it would be nice. I'm not knocking a Pro if it came out. I'd be like, yeah, you know what? I was absolutely wrong. Egg on my face, But hey, it's cool that it's there for people who want it. That's great. But as of right now, especially because it's been reported on for like 5 to 6 years at this point and still nothing, yeah, probably means it's not real. It's the same thing how I feel about Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Metroid Prime. Everybody was so sure what we were going to get at this last direct, and they've been rumored nearly every single year, and wow, look at that, still nothing. Those games have also been rumored since like the Switch came out, pretty much. So it's just like, yeah, like all those rumors on top of the Switch Pro, I've just stopped caring about entirely. I just find the Switch Pro stuff annoying at this point, quite honestly. Because, like, yeah, I get that people want it, and there's nothing wrong with wanting a Switch Pro. I'm not annoyed about that, but I'm annoyed that people keep talking about it like it's going to happen, even though there is zero proof that actually exists, besides some very minor things. Like, people are just like, well, Nintendo was asking some developers to get their games 4K ready. Yeah, that's great. They could ask that 4 to 5 years in advance of a next-gen system. What's your point? That, to me, that doesn't show any evidence of a Pro. To me, that just shows evidence of their next-gen system. So, yeah, I do not believe a Switch Pro at all. I do not. Unless there's like stuff. The only way at this point, especially with how many leaks and rumors there have been over the years, that I would actually believe a Switch Pro is if we legit got screenshots and videos and all that sort of stuff about it. Like, I could clearly go on YouTube, look up the leaks about it, and see it in person and see it running in action. If that was the case, then I would believe it. Other than that, it's gotten to the point where it's just like, yeah, it just feels like people are desperate for a Switch Pro and just keep looking at everything as like a sign that the Switch Pro is going to happen, even though in actuality, all these signs really are leading to nowhere, at least so far. And I don't think they're going to lead to anywhere for the foreseeable future. So, yeah. But yeah, no, like the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance leaks last year, that was like or actually no, earlier this year, that was like crazy stuff. Like we even got like a game list of games that they're testing and everything. See, if it was something like that, then I could believe it. Because, yeah, no, I fully believe that GBA Switch Online and Game Boy Switch Online are coming at some point, especially after those major leaks. No doubt. And especially with Pokemon Stadium coming at N64, yeah, absolutely. It just makes sense. But the Switch Pro has never had a leak or a rumor like that, not even close. It's just extremely minor things that people take as like, oh my god, this is it. People are just like, oh man, Nintendo Switch sales are slowing down a little bit. They should probably get a Pro out there. I don't think a Pro would boost sales that much at all, especially because it would be way more expensive than most people think. Because most people think they would get rid of the OG Switch for some reason, even though it's still selling extremely well. Move the OLED down to 300, even though it's still selling just fine at 350. And then make the Switch Pro like 350. And I'm just like, yeah, that would be great, but this is Nintendo we're talking about. They just released the OLED like a little over a year ago. Why would they already bring it down to 300? And the OG Switch is still selling just fine, so why would they just suddenly get rid of that? Doesn't make much sense, especially since the Black Friday bundle is the OG Switch still. Because, yeah, clearly the OG Switch is selling just fine for them to keep it going. So, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts about the Switch Pro. It would be cool if it happened again. I'm not like vehemently against it or anything. I'm just against all the leaks and rumors because, in my opinion, at this point, it's just like, yeah, these leaks and rumors keep getting like less and less realistic to the point where it's just like, yeah, this just sounds like the next gen Switch to me, if it's even anything at all. You know, these leaks and rumors could just be completely wrong. So, yep, those are kind of my off the cuff thoughts about the Switch Pro. I just I just think it's important to be realistic about this. And that's what I feel like most people who talk about the Switch Pro are not being, is realistic. Because if we want to be extremely realistic about this, I don't think a Switch Pro has ever existed, will ever exist, and was never even on the docket for Nintendo. Because again, they've never competed on power since the Wii. Why would they all of a sudden do it just because a couple people want it? Doesn't make sense to me. So, those are my thoughts about it. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think, because I've never actually heard a compelling argument why people actually legitimately believe this Switch Pro thing. Just besides the fact that, oh, there's a lot of leaks and rumors out there, which isn't enough for me at this point to actually believe that it's real. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.